was not just one person's. It was the fellowship's message that we were trying to bring to Latin America and get started and get away from some of the old ways of having a central power of authority in those places. So Colombia had written us and sent us their book and also told us about their structural problems, which involved an office. And in there was a group in Cali. It was separate from the group in Medellin. And Medellin had the most experienced members, so they had the big power, and they wanted everything to come to Medellin.
Okay.
Well, my first trip to Colombia, I landed in Cali. So that immediately started some discourse and problem, but it gradually went away. And much as the other fellowships developed throughout Latin America, you had two sides. You had two groups who were opposed to each other. They were really wanting to get together. They didn't know how to bring themselves together because they had acted so long separately that they couldn't get over some of the problems that they had and that they shared. So they never came together. And what we tried to do was to bring them a message of unity. You know, together they have so much more resources and so much more opportunity to make the fellowship work there, that they needed to come together. And we worked very hard at times in bringing that together, because members were, you know, some were 7 or 8 years clean and were stuck in their ways. Excuse me. But it was a beautiful sight to see them come together. And for me, that was the beauty of the trip, not only in the individual people, you know, who I came to love and enjoy so much being with, you know, and just the Latin American attitude towards life always had attracted me. So I would go back to my office and think of ways that I could help. How can we help these fellowships get together and help build up experienced members and help the recovery grow and the services grow so that other addicts could get the message? And there were some individual hard workers in all the communities. You know, there was always 1 or 2 people who did everything, which was the same in the U.S. And so we shared that with them, that was no different. That was typically an addict thing more than it was a Latin American thing. And we just tried to share with them, you know, the power of the traditions and the steps and how we had utilized them in the United States in our experience in recovery. We really did very little then to try and help them come together. We were the bridge,
Right.
you know, between the different sides, and worked with all sides, you know, and didn't want to play favorites. And gradually they saw the value of that, you know, and they began working together, which was just the best, as far as I was concerned, to be an observer there. And we talked about, you know, different printing things and whether or not we should print in the U.S. or print in Latin America, and who and where would we print, who would take care of it, who would act like an agent of the WSO.
Yeah, because I remember every now and then a big controversy would, you know, how come we're printing in the U.S., we're a poor country, we should be printing at home, and I remember there was everybody that started to get involved wanted to find out what was going on. And I think it had something to do with the paper. It's like oil. It's, you know, it's one price, you know, all over the world. And so tell me a little bit, how was it to serve at the World Service Office for so many years? Really, I believe to take the torch from Jimmy Kay or his generation, and you were for almost 15 years or 15 years at the World Service Office. How was that NA as a whole to see and they develop all over the world. Because I know Latin America was, it sparked up in the late 80s and really blew up on the 90s. And how about the rest of the world and your experience on being at the WSO for so many years?
Well, without a doubt, that was the best thing for me, to work at the WSO and to help all these different struggling fellowships to come together and to work together, to stand up on their own 2 feet, and just to be a part of that process was really an honor. And always gave me the fuel to go for more and work harder and work more to try and get things done, and try and push the Latin Americans as much as I could, which is a very difficult task at times. But, they came along, that gradually they saw the value, and they came together, got over their resentments, with the different sides, and decided that they were working for the addict that still suffered. And came together and stood up on their own 2 feet and worked together. And then we tried to get all the Latin American fellowships together, in the Latin American Zonal Forum.
Yeah.
And push that and try and get that as a communication point to where the fellowships in Latin America could help each other and wouldn't need so much from the WSO.
And that's been going on for many years now.
Yeah.
I know at least I've been around for 11 years, and I think it's been going on for longer than that, the Zonal Forum. So that's a success. I know last year there was one in Brazil, and I heard it was a success, although I didn't have an opportunity to go.
Well, money, in Latin America, money has always been the big problem. Either too much and didn't have any, anybody looking out for it, or too little, of course, because they just were not rich communities. It was a struggle, for members to put money into the basket in Latin America, and it took a lot longer to build up any type of fund which could be used to do other things.
And that's true still to this day. I guess maybe because of the nature of the economies down there. But in Brazil, I know that it's rare. I mean, at least 5 years ago, that was the last time I was there. It was still rare to see people put actually bills. You always hear the coins. And I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's the nature of the habit. And here in the U.S., on the contrary, you always see, and of course the economy here is much, stronger and all that. But apparently there's a conscious now. Now, for example, even the U.S. went through the fellowship here, where now people is like, you see people putting $2, $3 into the basket, much more than just that dollar that 20 years ago were worth much more than now.
Yeah, and the dollar 20 years ago didn't have the same buying power. And that was a problem. But, we were able to overcome those things by working together. And my job was to bring the different groups together and try and get people to work together in all the different communities, and then be able to help each other. The Latin American Zonal Forum was an opportunity to have all of the Latin American countries come together in a convention setting as well as a business setting. And it ended up with having the World Convention in Cartagena.
Absolutely.
Jorge Mejia he asked me about, whether or not I thought there would ever be a convention in Latin America. I said, yes, there will be. So we worked very hard to bring that about, and it actually happened, and when it did, I was unable to attend. But, my heart was there every moment.
Absolutely.
And that's probably the only regret I have in recovery, is that I wasn't able to share that with them in person.
Absolutely. And myself also, because I had been to the last 4 World Conventions.
Yeah.
Atlanta in 2002, San Diego 2003, Honolulu 2005, and last year San Antonio. And that's the one convention that I did not go, that I heard a lot of people that have been to a lot of conventions said that that was probably one of the best conventions of all time. Although it wasn't as big as the ones in the US, they said the vibe and the passion and the gratitude of having the convention down there was amazing.
And it was a dream that became a reality for them, you know. When Jorge asked me that question, it seemed like it would never happen.
Right.
And when I first met Jorge, he brought a film that he had gotten from the Cartagena Visitors Bureau and brought it with us just to show me. He brought it to the conference a year later. And that was another thing where the Latin Americans started taking their seat at the World Service Conference. You know, I pushed for that also, because I believed with the decisions that we were making at the time that they needed to be involved. You know, that they had a stake in this. They needed to be involved. And that's what I, tried to push together to get them to come and get the money for them to come, which was difficult at the time. But I think it has turned into a long-term value for the fellowship as a whole.
Yeah.
Having the Latin American community has certainly laid the groundwork for how we approach every other large community around the world, the Southeast Asia, Pacific, even Europe.
Yeah.
You know, we learned through working with the Latin Americans.
Yeah.
And it really has been a blessing for us, to have that success that's been going on down there.
And we want to, being Brazilian, and we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts, because I don't think many people of the new generation know these stories. And I know that we love to hear the foundation and how it went, how it actually happened. And George is somebody who lived in Miami, grew up in Miami, so he understood the Latin culture, and he was passionate about, taking what became part of his life, and he embraced as a life in recovery down there, and now it's saving lives all over Latin America. I think the only country now that I haven't heard in Latin America that still don't, I haven't heard about NA in it, it's Paraguay. And that I might be wrong on that, and I probably am, but even Bolivia, which I hadn't heard, I know their fellowship is going. So I want to thank you, George, really for who you've been all throughout all these years, and I want to recognize you and acknowledge for being a stand for Narcotics Anonymous, being a stand for recovery, and that your work made a difference and continues to make a difference, and the ripple effects will be felt forever and will change lives either in Cali, in Buenos Aires, in Campinas, in Rio, hopefully in Asunción, Paraguay. And so I want to thank you for taking the time, and
I appreciate the thank you, but you know what? It was a labor of love.
yeah,
I would have done it over and over and over again if I could have, It was such a labor of love, and what it gave me is that every time I went down there, I got the energy that I needed to continue working at the WSO every day and get the complaints from other parts of the world that would come in, oh, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. Latin America always recharged me. So they made me keep coming back, and it was just a loving relationship that we had, and I was very honored, and it gives me a great deal of pleasure to see the success and the growth that's taken place down there. And it'll always be a part of my life, wherever I go. And the love and the letters that I got when I was in the hospital was also very moving. People who I had just met for 5 minutes or more, you know, sending me letters, you know, you've touched my life. That's what kept me going, you know, pulled me out of my depression
Yeah.
and gave me the strength to get up and start walking out of that bed. You know, it was just remembering those things that were so beautiful, you know, and like in Brazil and Colombia, they're both very poetic
Mm-hmm.
fellowships. And, you know, that was very special for me. It was like a love was sent to me, you know, through the years that kept me going and made me want to keep NA growing and being successful. And I love it, and there was no thank you needed. It was all what you've done for me, too. I can never say in words.
Thank you, George.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much for spending some time with us, and we will put some translations into this recording, and we'll spread out throughout conventions in Latin America so they find out where it started, that there was people here in the other side of the globe making it happen. So thank you again for your time, and keep coming back.
Thanks.
Thank you, George.
I'll just stay.